Come December 14, 2016, it will be 10 years since our son Tim suicided. So it's coming up for 10 years for us as a family. For the people who are recently bereaved from suicide, or 5 years down the track, or 2 years down the track, I'm hoping that what I'm saying may give you some hope and light as to how I've dealt with it and we've dealt with it as a family and where we're going with it after 10 years. I still remember that morning, December 14, 2006, is embedded in my brain. And that is something that will never ever leave us as a family or me as a father. I felt at the time, it's hard to put it into words, but it's just as if I was a balloon and someone was holding me tight at the top and then just let it go. And this rush of air went out, and you went from having a form and a body and a shape of matter to nothing, just to a completely lifeless shell. And that's how I felt that morning, and that's how I felt at various stages over the next 2 to 3 weeks. I found that it was extremely, extremely worrying that we as a family weren't aware that that could happen to us. Our son had no history of mental illness, had no history of drugs, had no history of heavy alcohol use, had no history of what could precipitate him to do what he did. Looking back on it now after 10 years, I'm well aware of why he chose to do that. I don't agree with what he did. We can't agree with what he did. But he was a fellow that was madly in love, felt that honesty and integrity were the two biggest things in anyone's life, as espoused to him by his grandfather. And when he found that the only person that he loved in this world more than anything else didn't love him, and in fact was in a relationship with somebody else whilst being in a relationship with him was just too much. We look back on it now and shake our heads and think, my goodness, what a silly, silly decision. But as it's come to us, and we've spoken to many people in the last 10 years, people who have suicided under similar circumstances or have felt completely powerless at that time. It's a momentary lapse of reasoning. There's no reasoning. There's no questions to, the often asked question is why. No one knows why. No one would ever be able to ask that question why and come up with a definitive answer from anyone who is suicided. Even the people with mental illnesses. You find it hard to ask them and for them to come back to you with a conclusive answer as to why. And I know that in some circumstances, many of my friends now that I've come into contact with through Support After Suicide and the men's group and the group at Frankston, we often ask that question, and there's only one person that can answer it, and they're not with us. My life has changed. Our lives as a family has changed. We celebrate things as a family probably more fervently than before. We have grandchildren now, and we didn't have grandchildren when Tim was alive. We continue to celebrate Tim's birthday. We continue to talk about Tim. I think that is a big thing with a lot of people who have lost someone to suicide. It's talking, openly communicating, keeping those lines of communication open, to always be not afraid to talk about that person who has left us, but to be openly involving them in your day-to-day conversation. Grandchildren weren't on the scene when Tim was alive, and now they are. And they're getting older. We have one 7, one 5, and one 15 months old. The 7-year-old and the 5-year-old constantly ask about Tim. They know that he was their uncle. They know that he was their mum's brother. Liam and I have been working on one of Tim's bikes, restoring it for Liam to ride. As he gets taller, he needs a bigger bike. So we've been restoring this bike, and it's absolutely looking fantastic. The bike's going to be just sensational. And out of the blue, just 2 weeks ago, Liam said to me, "Would you have any film of Tim on a bike?" And yes, we did. We had plenty of film of Tim on a bike. So that's the first time that he'd ever asked that question. So we sat down and we put it on, and he could actually see his uncle riding the bike, which was, it took, for Liam, that was a new context. You can see photos of the person, you can ask questions, but to then see a living human being that he never knew other than from photos, to be riding the bike and doing the things that he could do on the bike. And it was a game changer. It was just such a fantastic moment that it was that they could acknowledge that, boy, this fellow was good on the bike, but that was Tim. That was him. The body, the person. That thank goodness for video. It was just brilliant, and it helped a lot with questions with children. And as they get older, they ask questions, and it was a great icebreaker for us, for them to know and see that happening. It was brilliant. I've spoken many times at to different groups of people, and I know that it's a common thread, that a lot of people feel guilty, and they say they feel guilty. I've openly said it, that I've never felt guilty ever, that we made a mistake, or that we should have seen this happening, or should have seen this or that happening. As much as it's just so devastating that your loved one has suicided, in our circumstances, it wasn't through, as I said earlier, it wasn't through mental illness, it wasn't through drug use or alcohol. He was, to use, as I said to some people, that he he died of a broken heart. He was absolutely broken-hearted, and he was just such a loyal fellow that we didn't feel guilty. We felt robbed. We just felt absolutely robbed that he couldn't see what we could see. The first few weeks and the first 12 months are as one of the books that were done here at Jesuit Social Services, there's nothing prepared me for this. You're just not prepared for what you're about to have happen after the suicide. Now, to deal with the death is one thing, but to deal with all the other statutory things is something else, and that sort of impacts on your grieving. That puts a lot of stress on your relationships, marriages, relationships with other people in the family, siblings and uncles, aunties, grandparents, your entire family. If you're a family that's has a good, strong background as a family, a unit, that impacts everybody. We were very fortunate, and we have been very fortunate in that we have always had a really strong moral compass as a family and as a wider family, and that certainly helped us get through especially the first 12 months. Without that, my heart just sinks with some people I've spoken to over this past 10 years with the situations with their families. That, some marriages have split up, and some, siblings have not communicated, and I feel sad, really sad for those people. We're fortunate, Heather and I, and our kids are fortunate. It sounds crazy, but we are fortunate that our family lifestyle and our family upbringing and what we place our faith in, not necessarily a spiritual faith, but our faith in, has been supportive, very supportive. It's hard, day to day, it was so difficult. Like just getting out of bed and doing things. I know for the first 3 or 4 weeks, I wore Tim's shoes. We both had the same size shoes, so I wore his shoes for the first 3 or 4 weeks. I would go down into his room and smell his clothes and just wish to heavens, that just that smell of his clothes, and things that, if everything was fine and it hadn't have happened, you would never find yourself walking in to your son's bedroom and picking up his shirt and smelling it, because you'd think, what the hell am I doing? But it was a natural thing to do because he wasn't there anymore, and you missed that smell, you missed that contextual ability to put a living body back there. I found myself wanting to take myself out of my comfort zone, and I'm hoping that if people do see this, that yes, you need to come out of your comfort zone. Don't be afraid to come out of your comfort zone, to step out of your comfort zone and just experience, bring on experiences that you never thought you'd want to have, but in the end, they're just so beneficial for you, especially men. I think men are finding it very hard. My father and my mother found it very hard to accept that Tim had suicided, because they were in that age where if someone suicided, it was just, oh, okay, yeah, oh, fine, But even though it was their own grandson, it was difficult. I remember as a child, I was just telling the fellows the other night at the men's group, as a child I was 14 going to high school. I used to walk to high school with this fellow who lived 5 or 6 houses down from me. We'd meet every morning and walk to school. One morning he wasn't there. Next week he wasn't there. He never ever came to school again. I thought he'd gone to boarding college or he was sick. Poor fellow had suicided. He was 14 years of age, maybe 15. And his parents and his sister, it was just like, no, he's not going to school. And it was just the weirdest thing now, and I look back on it, I can't get my head around that, that it was like a closed door. No one mentioned it in the street, no one talked about it in the street. I'm not going to say his name, but his name's in my brain, and I know, we walked to school together for 4 years. And I still can't get over the strange context that it couldn't be discussed then. But that was back then, and thank goodness it's changed. That society has changed. We've still got a long way to go, but it has changed. You just surround yourself with your friends and family in the initial stages is so important. And you will find that some friends can't deal with it, and they perhaps don't want to deal with it. We found that. We did. Some people who we thought would be very strong weren't, and they drifted they drifted into the background, and then, to be honest, drifted completely out of our lives. We've never seen them again. 10 years we haven't seen them. And other people who were there, they're acquaintances and we knew them, they stepped forward, and those people have been immense support. So there is a time and there are people in your life that will drift in and fill that space when you need support and you need help. Staying strong and talking as a family is just so important. And if you haven't got that family support, then you really need to reach out and get support. You've got to get support from somewhere. And if you can't get it within your family, you need to get it outside of your family. People who are further down the track, who can help you, listen to you, talk to you, provide you with assistance, provide you with information, provide you with the right contacts to help you get through those hard times, yeah.